afternoon, everybody. Welcome to our lunchtime series. I'm joined by our guest speaker, Bron, which I have to say, Bron, I am very proud of you. You've been very resilient with technology giving us left hooks. I don't know. So thank you so much for being so resilient and being patient. And that not only goes to our guest speaker, but also to all of you that's here, that's made the time. I want to apologize for the technological issues and difficulties that we have. It was absolutely unforeseen and unplanned, but we are here, so that is great. Thanks again to MASA, the Marketing Association of South Africa, that is supporting this initiative. So I'm joined by Bron. Bron, not only are you resilient, but your bio that you've said also said that you've climbed the ladder from runner, director, creative director, executive creative director on a variety of agencies and in a variety of countries. I think you've also worked for MultiChoice, which most of our participants in today's session would know of. You have a BBA degree majoring in strategic and financial management. You've studied digital marketing, design thinking, and you were fortunate enough to also be involved in the Gibbs Learnership Program, an innovation course. And then also you are affiliated with MASA as a chartered marketer. And you describe yourself as a chief strategic officer, marketer, legal contract officer, creative, and artist. And I think you now have to say resilient to technology and challenges that gets thrown your way. So Bron, thank you so much for joining us. Now, after taking a deep breath, how do you feel?
I'm like beyond, because I'm normally like the tech person helping people with their tech. I'm not normally the person whose tech just decides to leave their planet. So, but here we are, and
don't worry. We
was very patient with me as well while I started losing my calm. So sorry, Eman.
It's fine. It's one of those things. Working from home, right, and using technology, the landscape has completely changed, right? So we know that if a dog barks, we're at home, it's authentic, it is real. And I always tell my students, if technology gives you problems, it really gives you problems because we're so dependent on it, and not just in our everyday lives, but I suppose in our marketing campaigns and with our consumers, how we engage with them, how we communicate with them. So I think this is a lesson to show us not only how resilient we are, but also how reliant on technology we are, how reliant on the internet we are, on things connecting and speaking to one another. And I'm sure you are very familiar with that as well. So Bron, thank you so much. I know that we'll probably have lunch a little bit later, but what are you planning on having for lunch today?
I am having leftover braai from yesterday. Braai day. It was the day. I know we're not meant to call it braai day anymore, but we still braai. So yeah, I'm having leftover braai.
Leftover braai is the best braai. So I'm with you on that note. Plus, I'll be having a lovely cup of coffee. So on that delicious note, again, Bron, I'm going to hand over to you. You've got a brilliant presentation. You've got so much expertise and knowledge to share with our students. So over to you, and have fun. Forget about technology.
I'm still having a little trouble with technology in the sharing department. But if I don't get through to these slides, then I will just talk.
Then we'll just talk to our students. We'll talk to the participants here. We'll share some knowledge and expertise. If we run over a bit over to that is also okay. Our session will be recorded for our audience members. If we run over time, it will be recorded. We will share it with you. So thank you so much. Okay.
Cool. Ron? Yeah. Okay. So it turns out I can't share my my presentation right now. So I'm just going to talk you through it because I think we're at that place of the day. Okay. So the subject matter of my talk is and was and will remain walking a mile in your audience's shoes and why that's so important. And while I was thinking about it, it came to me that a lot of us often use the word innovation. It's sort of one of those overused words in marketing, along with, think of your briefs, right? In your brief, you're asked to engage, reach, be relevant, be authentic, retain, cut through, drive awareness. And my absolute favorite, of course, is make it pop. Because, we just push the make it pop button, and then that just, makes innovation. So if we think about innovation, we think like, how do we innovate? What is innovation? And immediately we start thinking, self-driving cars and vacuum cleaners that vacuum our houses and the cats can drive around on them. And that is and isn't innovation. It is innovation if you're innovating for the Kardashians. If you're not innovating for them, you're innovating for someone else. That's not innovation, because the definition of innovation is actually speaking to the wants and needs of people in a surprising or cost-effective way. And if you can do surprising and cost-effective, then you're really innovating, right? So if you're thinking in South Africa, for example, electric cars, we don't have electricity. That is not an innovation for South Africa, right? I think a self-vacuuming vacuum might work in South Africa, but like if you have dogs, like you mentioned, working from home and dogs, that thing starts moving around, your dog's going to kill it.
Yes.
So it's not, it's about who it's for. And if we think about innovation through the ages, a lot of it has to do with communication. So for example, when the first Neanderthals started speaking to each other in spoken word, that was an innovation in and of itself. Then we had cuneiform writing, in stone. Then we had quill and ink. Then we had the printing press. Now we have, communication. We wear it on our wrist, right? While we were trying to fix the technical issues, I was even speaking to the guys on my phone. You see what I mean? I am actually technical, but not today. And I think the reason innovation a lot of the time has to do with communication is we go back to good old Maslow's triangle, pyramid, and right there in the middle, love and belonging exists. And that comes, and if we can't communicate with each other, how do we express love? How do we feel belonging? And then we go up the pyramid to esteem and self-actualization, and all of that is connected with communication. But this is not about communication, this is about innovation. So I think we can all agree the car was a pretty good innovation, right? But why do you think the car was invented? Sort of a rhetorical question, and I would do a poll, but we're running out of time. So Henry Ford is well known for saying, if I'd asked people what they wanted, they would have said faster horses. So does that mean the car was invented to go faster? Or was the car invented to go further? So for example, in America, it could take you 1 week to get from New York to like a few miles down the coast, right? Just on your little horse, and then horse might go lame and all the things. So maybe it was to go further. Actually, neither of those. The car was invented because the world had a poo problem. So at the time in New York, there was around 100,000 horses running around the streets, right? Dragging carriages, doing the things. And in a day, those 100,000 horses could drop 1.4 million kilograms of poop and 152,000 liters of urine. So it was pretty disgusting. There were flies everywhere. They were carrying disease. Children were dying from typhoid. People were actually dying from horse-related injuries, half of which was slipping and falling in the mess that was on the streets. And then in 1872, they had a horse flu epidemic. So now 2% of the horses died. So now first they had a poo problem. Now they had a dead horse problem. So they had the world's first international urban planning conference in New York. The brightest minds of everywhere sat together and tried to solve this problem of both the horse poo and the dead horses. And after putting all their minds together, they had no solution. And the conclusion of the conference was urban civilization is doomed. So
Oh my goodness,
We
can
go
I
back.
just stop you and say, when you asked the question, I was like, well, it's probably getting the transportation, getting from point A to point B, and that must have been it. And then when you talk about faster or further, I was like, oh, well, that's interesting. Did people have a need to travel further? Was there a need to travel faster? And it was actually something completely different. And I get
Yes.
your point about innovative thinking is not just a once off little tick box that you can tick. There's multiple facets and multiple reasons, and also about the time I assume that you're in and the problems that we are facing of society. So my mind is blown. I'm going to Google after this. So sorry for interrupting you, Bron. I was just like, oh my goodness,
No,
I
all
didn't
good.
do this. Who can I tell this to? So that's probably the next thing I'm
When
going
I
to do.
when I send you my presentation, there's some links on the slides, and then you can see the links there to all that. So at that point, Henry Ford had solved, in a surprising way, the wants and needs of people, right? Because now they could clean their streets, they could stop dying of diseases, and the poor old horses who were also dying of diseases could feel better. But then he still hadn't done anything cost effectively. Oh, look, there's my presentation.
Yes, our beautiful team in the back is trying to pull up your presentation. So
Oh,
while you talk, if you see things
amazing.
coming on the screen,
Go to slide 25, guys.
slide 25.
That's amazing. Sure, we are making progress. All right, yeah. Okay, so now what had happened is Henry Ford had solved in a surprising way the problems of the people, right? But it still was not cost effective because these cars were costing around, back in that day, like $2,000. And a horse over 2 years, because the poor horses were only living about 2 years in those days because they were living in such terrible circumstances, cost about $650 over the 2 years. So if you amortize that across 24 months, it's actually a very small amount. Now you're saying to people, I have the solution, but it's orders of magnitude more expensive.
It's more than you would have expected.
So, but eventually, once he reached the Model T, which is the one we all know of, next slide, guys. So once he reaches the Model T, because he started with Model A, then B, then C, then D, then it eventually cost $295. So it was a lot less than it was, to have a horse. Okay, so more. That's our communication. Came with pictures. There's Maslow. There's the car. That's a Mercedes.
That's the original car. That's cool. And is this now the one that you're talking about? Go faster. We talked about
that's
that.
A Porsche. Sure. There we go. Further. Next. Emojis are coming. Next.
Yeah, that actually was a big pause point for me as well. I was thinking, what else could it possibly be? And it just shows you need to know your history to really understand how products have evolved, or the needs of people have evolved in such a short amount of time.
And then next. There's next. So there's your Model T. Okay, that's where we are now. Okay, so if we really need to walk a mile in people's shoes, like how do we do this, right? Next slide. And it's one word, and that is empathy. And Liz Ray mentioned I have in the past studied design thinking, which has been one of my most favorite things to study. Next slide. And with design thinking, your departure point is empathy. And then you can see it goes back and forth, because design thinking is not linear. Previous slide. Design thinking is not linear because it's you kind of go back and forth through the process until you reach the ultimate end goal, which is when you implement, and then you observe again how it works in people's lives, and so you go back and forth. But the departure point is empathy, and it's quite mind-blowing once you get into it. But the bottom line of it is, next slide, if you can't understand your consumer's needs, sorry, next slide please, you just can't meet them. So, and each consumer is completely different. Next slide. The next slide is a video that I don't think is going to play. So I'll walk you through it. Okay. So what this is a Pepsi commercial. I'm sure some of you have heard about it. That starred Kendall Jenner. And she and it's a test, and it's every pretty person you've ever seen in your life walking through the streets, and it's so shallow and candy floss. And in the end, she gives the cops a Pepsi, and they smile, and that's the end of the ad. It was during the period of Black Lives Matter and all the terrible things that were happening in America between the African American population and the police. Ultimately, they pulled the advert because everyone realized it was trivializing Black Lives Matter, and it really was resonating at all. Next slide. The strange thing was that the share price actually rallied while everyone was dumping on Pepsi and on Kendall Jenner and saying, like, how stupid can you be? And it plummeted when they apologized and they pulled it. Next slide. What happened was they lost tons of money and brand equity because the piece cost about $2 million conservatively to make, $2 million, which is like, I don't know, 800 million rand, and maybe even 5 million if you consider her talent costs. Then they probably spent about 100 million on media costs, and then their brand equity plummeted over periods of time. So the actual bottom line damage was incalculable, really. But then if we look at the next slide, and we of course all know exactly what we're looking at here, which is Colin Kaepernick when he took a knee, same period of time, and Nike, who stands with athletes, any athlete, plus size athletes, new athletes, experienced athletes, professional athletes, child athletes, they stand by athletes. That's what they say, as they call, stood by him. Next slide. And everything good happened because it was real and it was authentic, and they had listened to their audience. They had actually connected with their audience. There were some old white people in the middle America who burned their sneakers, and Trevor Noah pointed out to them, guys, Nike already has your money. You're actually just hurting yourself because now you have to go spend more money on new shoes. But the share price rallied. Colin Kaepernick will never look back. He's, richer than God now. Even though they did kick him out of the Super Bowl, he got so many endorsement deals, so many speaking deals. He's 100% fine. And it worked because it connected with the audience. They saw someone in their audience who was also a user of their product, Colin Kaepernick, took a knee. Everyone said, yes, that means what it means. And they stood by him. So listening to the audience, picking up, and not being tone deaf. Okay, next slide. So how do we do this empathy thing? It is not a new age panpipe music meditation thing. Don't worry, I'm not going there. I'm not that guy. Okay, what we actually do, next slide, it's very practical. So the first thing you do is you put your ego aside, you put all your biases aside that you think you know about your audience. You actually set demographics aside, because here's the thing. If you look at me and you look at Liz Ray, demographically, we are the same person. I can guarantee you that lived life-wise, we're very different people, but demographically, we would be smushed together. And whichever one of us spoke louder would be the result of the research. So we put demographics aside because, and we know that largely we're seeing them as quite outdated. So we're more speaking to psychographics than that. We understand that our market is not ourselves. So we do make this mistake a lot of the time of marketing to ourselves, or marketing to our CEOs, or marketing to the We Love Four Ways group. I've worked in several places where they're like, oh no, the campaign's not working. The We Love Four Ways people didn't like it. But you have to ask yourself, is that who you were trying to sell to? Probably not. And they're also very angry people. And then don't ask, if possible, don't directly ask people the questions you want the answers to, because they themselves don't know what biases they have. I don't know about you, but I find it very hard to articulate my feelings in words. And actually, psychologically, the place that you make feelings and the place that you make words live in completely different places in your brain. And they have routines that they don't realize. So a lot of the time you'll ask them if they do something, they're like, no, I don't think so. But actually they do, once they are made more aware of their lives. Okay, next slide. So what we do is we observe. And if you think about the humility on this slide, as we connect to the next slide, observe like you've never seen what you're looking at before. Like, be astonished, be curious. Listen to what people don't say more than what they do say. And if possible, immerse yourself in the actual lives of your audience. So I have a colleague in Australia who got moved from the entertainment department at Sky into the sports department. And he was like, I know I'm an Australian man, but I don't know how to speak sport. And then what he did was he just went and he hung around the stadia. So not actually at the games, but around all the stadia before the games. And he would walk with the people and talk to the people and see their T-shirts and see their face paint. And he started immersing himself in their world. And their world is far more outside the stadium as they approach and when they leave than actually watching the games. And through that, he made many, many, many multi-award-winning pieces for sport. And he still didn't speak sport, but he spoke people. And then there's another
I like that. He spoke people. That makes a lot of sense. The empathy, speaking to people, what you talked about, innovation, communicating differently, it sort of resonates with me. I love that, Bron.
Absolutely. I think my slides are stuck, so I'll just keep going. And then the other thing you can do, if you can't physically immerse yourself in your audience's lives, is you actually can ask people to do a photo journal. And what that does is it makes them see their lives differently. So in the UK, by doing photo journals, they noticed that there's a bottleneck at the train entry point. So where you swipe your ticket and the boom opens. So we have it at the Gautrain as well. You swipe your little card, opens, right? But what they noticed was people had to stop, take the card out of their wallet, swipe it, put it back in the wallet, and walk through. And then they said, well, why don't they leave it in the wallet? And because the technology that you'd swipe it across was affecting people's bank cards, right? So, like something their ATM card doesn't work. So they changed the technology and they kind of lo-fied it more. So it would only read the it's called an Oyster card. And it wouldn't affect bank cards or anything. Different frequencies had no effect on anything other than the Oyster card. Suddenly no bottlenecks. And that they discovered through doing photo journals of people commuting back and forth. So they actually put up little GoPros and they just watched the traffic of people through. And they would see bottleneck through. And so they changed it, no bottlenecks. So it's such a simple innovation, but so in touch with audience.
I think you said it. It's about observing things that you wouldn't have seen otherwise by immersing yourself with your consumer and the problem that you're trying to solve, because it really is that it is need, problem, what's happening, how can we innovate, how can we make things better. I love that.
Okay, jump 2 slides forward. Then I'm going to show you the right innovation, wrong target. So you can go to the next slide. There we go. So DSTV had this thing a few years ago. Well, it was quite a few years ago, probably about 7 years ago. It went off the market. But it was called a walker, and it was this amazing thing. It was handheld TV. You could take TV anywhere you wanted to in the world. I mean, not in the world, in South Africa. And as long as you had DSTV, you could watch DSTV wherever you were. It was like having a wireless radio. And it actually worked on radio technology. Next slide. And they generally thought people would commute with these things. So they thought they would give it to their helpers maybe, and they could watch TV on the way into work, or they could give it to the kids and they would watch TV in the car. Next slide. The problem was the signal on that thing was less stable than bunny ears. So if you could yoga yourself into a pretzel and hold the thing out the window, you would maybe get a signal. So it wasn't working at all where they thought it would. Next slide. And then one of the CEOs at DSTV was at a sporting event, and he went out on the balcony of their private box, as you do, and he looked down and he saw walkers everywhere with people with one earphone in. And as it turned out, the picture signal was terrible. The audio signal was good. So what people were doing was using it to hear the commentary of the match while they were watching the match live. But they discovered this way too late in the life cycle of the device, and it had already lost them gajillions of monies, and so they had to discontinue it. But had they just thought about it for a second, like, why do people get DSTV generally? Sport. So does it not run logically that thing would have had something to do with sport, and they would have started out in the right starting point at least? Okay, so that's an insight. Next slide. So insights are your actual compass to relevant solutions. So you need those insights, and that's not data. Insights are when you turn data and findings into something useful, right? So next slide. If we go back to design thinking, there's a thing you can do called an experience map, and this does so much more than normal kind of research where we get verbatims and then we get quantitative stuff and then we think we. What an experience map does, and this is through your own immersion or someone doing photo diaries or anything like that, it gives you doing, thinking, feeling, experiencing. And the combination of that will give you the insight as to how this innovation is actually going to work for people. So do they feel empowered at a point? Do they feel stupid? Do they feel confused? And the most dangerous thing you could ever do is either make your customers feel confused or stupid. The only time you get away with that is when people have lost their passwords, because generally people think it's their own fault. But at any other time in your customer journey, if you make them feel stupid, you have lost them. And so if you go through an experience map like this and you see any of those danger words, confused, overwhelmed, stupid, you know that you have a problem right there. And you need to fix that before you even think about taking this thing to market. Okay, next slide. So here's something absolutely interesting and beautiful that I discovered just last week. So if we go to the next slide, we all know about the concept of economies of scale, right? The interesting thing is economies of scale equates to a poverty tax. So if you can buy, example, Iwisa, 12.5 kilograms of Iwisa, it costs you 140 Rand, it's going to cost you 11 Rand 20 per kilogram, right? But if you can only afford 35 Rand, which means you can only get 2.5 kilograms, you're going to spend nearly 3 Rand more on your Iwisa. And if you are poor, you are therefore spending more money on food than a rich person can, because you only have the 40 Rand. You don't have 140 Rand. So it's actually like economies of scale are actually like a poverty tax. Next slide. And the person I learned this from is an amazing man called Miles Kubeka. If we can go to the next slide, please.
I heard him speak at
yes,
the MASA event.
Yes.
When was it? Last week.
Was
it last
yes.
week already? And I was just about to comment on the shop that they did. Oh, great minds, Bron. Yeah, I love this idea. Brilliant.
So he realized this he discovered this kind of economies of scale poverty tax, right? And he started a company called Qualisa. It's in Alex right now, but spreading to other places. And basically what he does is he buys at scale, so he pays less, and then he sells it at the bulk prices in micro sizes. So now you don't even have to buy like 2.5 Ks. You can buy 500 grams, and he sells it to you at the cost price of the 11 Rand 20 per kilogram instead of the 14 Rand per kilogram. And he's got two driving purposes in his life. One is to make basic foodstuffs available to low-income households at the bulk price, and the second is to remove waste from informal areas. So you actually bring like a little glass jar or something from your home, like your own scaftine, whatever shape it comes in. You bring it there. Obviously, they zero that on the scale, and they put the product in, and you pay just for the product. So now you're also not paying for extra packaging, and you're not there's no need for you to throw it away. You bring your jar back next time, and you're sorted.
What I love about this is you can make food by taking different products exactly in the measurements that you like, and buy exactly what you need. So there's no freezing, there's no leftover, there's nothing. It's exactly what you need. You pay for that. So if you want one tea bag or a pinch of this or a little bit of that, you buy exactly for what you need for your family, and then you come back the next time. So I thought that was very innovative about the way he thought about the needs of his community, empathy, and then just communicating in a different way. So this is such a beautiful case.
Yes, exactly. And literally he discovered this by walking a mile on the streets. Like, you couldn't discover this any other way. And connecting with stakeholders. Next slide. This is one of those overused marketing words as well. We love to say the word stakeholders, but who are stakeholders? Again, they are people, always people. All our little words equate to people. Next slide. So if we look at something now, so we look at how out of touch Pepsi was in that commercial I told you about. Now we look at Gucci. I mean, this is a brand that's over 100 years old, and somehow it is still that cool that it is currently, in Gen Z terminology, the word for cool is it's Gucci. Okay, how has a 100-year-old brand done that? If we look next slide, they actually go and they have a shadow board. So they started with millennials. It's a shadow, like a shadow board for their C-suite, and they asked them, "What do you think?" And now they've replaced their millennial board with Gen Zs, and the Gen Zs will say, as only Gen Zs can, don't make some weird old ass campaign because they will tell it as it is. And that's how they are staying relevant, because they're asking the actual stakeholders, the actual market, who they want to market to. What do you think? Next slide, please. And we have, who was also at the conference last week, our very own Gen Z whisperer, by the name of Marco Stavro. And while he was at the conference last week, he was telling us some interesting things about Gen Z, like, you have 8 seconds to get my attention, automate, it should just work. I come from a place where I push a button and it works. Don't give me things that don't work. You'll lose me immediately. He's like, video. Why aren't you doing video? It's easy, because they just clip cut, quick, video, done, shot, produced, and delivered, maybe 2 hours. So that I can do it, why can't you do it? And he gave us this interesting thing. He's like, I've never had to walk up to someone at a bar and go, "Hi, come here often." He's like, I just go on Tinder, swipe right, and I'm a stud. It's like a completely different lived experience. And if you don't walk a mile in their shoes, you do not know it. You cannot innovate for them, right? So if you don't have a video that automates, that gets their attention in 8 seconds, and target communities, they don't like to stand out. My daughter's Gen Z, and I always tease her. I say, you and your friends move around like chickens, or like those penguins that you see where they go across the thing and then they lose a penguin and then they go fetch it and they bring it back. Those are Gen Z. Next slide, please. So while I was getting so excited about Marco, I show him to oh no, sorry, wrong. I missed the slide of my thoughts here. So while we were watching this at the conference, right, the comments were amazing. Like, this guy is dropping truths. Amazing to hear this from the actual target audience. He's coming for our jobs. Haha. I never thought of that. So it's exactly that. Like, this conference was for marketers, and they like obviously get the best research money can buy and everything. They'd never actually thought of or heard any of the things that he just said, and he was just saying it as his lived truth. Next slide, please. So I'm super excited about this guy. Amazing. I come home, I show my daughter, and she dies from cringe. Oh, no, we've gone too far. I'm back. She dies from cringe because what is sitting in the corner of his slide? It says youth speaker. And she was like, who wrote that? Oh my God, that's so cringe. So I was like, well, fortunately, actually, that is right for the target audience, because it was marketers that are Gen Z, but I get your point. Even that, this whole slide she looks at, she only sees the youth speaker. She's like, that's so cringe, I could die. And that just shows how quickly and easily we can overlook stuff through our own bias. We're like, yeah, that makes sense. He's a youth, he's speaking. But it was wrong if we were speaking to Gen Z. Okay, now next slide. Now we can walk a mile and connect unexpected stakeholders. Next slide, please. There is a beautiful video, but it's not going to play. But fortunately, there's an image before that. Okay. So Corona did this amazing thing where they did a plastic fishing tournament. So they looked at their market and they saw, look, fishermen, the biggest problem that fishermen have is that there's less fish. Every single month of every single year, there's less fish. Why? Because they are suffocating under plastic and they are dying from plastic. But who are the people that are most in contact with the plastic? Fishermen. So they set up this amazing thing all over the world. You can see there the different markets that they went to, here as well in South Africa. And they sent the fishermen out and they said, go fetch plastic. Go use the nets and everything you have to fetch plastic. And they had this competition, and the one who brought in the most won a prize. But they also connected the fishermen with recyclers, because once you get the fish out the ocean, what are you going to do with it? Like if you go put it in a landfill, you go put it like on the beach, it's just going back where it came from, right? So they connected them with the recyclers, and now they have that connection. So if it's not a fishing day, instead of waiting for a fishing day, they can go out, fetch plastic, bring that to the recyclers, and they earn a second stream of income. So now you're cleaning the ocean, so there's more fish for them to catch, so they can make more money out of fish, and they can make more money out of collecting plastic because they've been connected with the recyclers. So by walking a mile in the fishermen's shoes and actually being on their boat and looking down at the ocean and seeing what they are dealing with, and also hearing them say, a lot of the time we scoop up fish and we scoop up plastic with them. They're like, hold a second, just scoop up the plastic. Let's do that. They've made this incredible connection for the fishermen that has changed their lives incredibly. Yeah. Skip the next one. Go to the slide 59. That one. Yeah. Okay. So is there a secret sauce, right? It seems like there's a secret sauce to empathy and innovation and connecting with audiences. If we go to the next one, there is sort of, okay? So we all know about Ikigai. And I'm sure we've all at some point on those dark Tuesdays where we feel like we're in the wrong job and life sucks, sat there and tried to figure this out for ourselves. Because the Ikigai is the thing that will make you most joyful in life. It's if you can get everything that is you to do the one thing, that's how you find it. I'm yet to find it. Quite like being a marketer, but I'm not sure it's my Ikigai. But that's the story for another day. Next slide. You can actually Ikigai your business. So if you look at all of these things, and we've always got visions and missions and offerings and passion projects, but if you put all of those together, in the middle is your business's purpose. And that's the secret sauce. If you can connect your business's purpose to your target audience's wants and needs in a cost-effective way, that is the innovation that is going to make you, firstly, crap tons of money, and secondly, make a difference in your audience's life and bring your product to your audience in a way that shows how you develop, value in their lives, right? That's why Nike worked, Pepsi didn't. Pepsi has no purpose other than they want you to drink their cold drink. Nike stands for athletes, stands with athletes. That's why it worked. It was this magical corporate Ikigai. All right, so one last example, and then we can chat if we have time. Okay, skip 63 and go to 64. Okay, so if we, there we go. Okay, so SA Breweries did this incredible thing called Bread of the Nation. So they discovered they have this leftover maize from when they make beer, and they live in South Africa, and there are like hundreds and thousands of millions of people that are food insecure. And they are trying to rebrand as an ethical brand, more connected to the communities and not just alcohol, Coming out of lockdown, we saw a lot, like people seeing alcohol brands a little bit differently, right? So they said, what if we take all this maize that we have as leftovers from our brewing product, it's still like food ready or whatever that term is, and make it into bread and donate this bread to communities in need. The interesting thing is this particular maize, because it comes from the beer making process, is higher in protein than normal maize. So this is not only really yummy bread, but also has a higher protein content. And they donated it to communities in need. You kind of look at that and you go, well, how does that help the brand? Or like, how does that make people drink more beer? That is pure brand work, right? That is developing love and brand affinity with your audience, so that when they go and they like feel like a beer and they want to choose one, somehow they choose Castle. They're not sure why, but there's this brand love inside of them that just says, I think I love that brand more than the others, and I'm not sure why. So, and that's the trouble we have a lot of the time with, pitching brand work to our executive, is that they'll go like, yeah, but how does that make people buy my product? Brand love is super, super, super important. And when I heard about this, the guy who was talking about this was saying at AB InBev, they are integrated end to end as an organization. So when someone comes up with an idea and it gets signed off, everyone gets involved. So someone in the organization then connected them with the food organization who actually distributes bread. So they could be secure in the fact that it was going to the right people under the right circumstances and everything like that. So it is a big ask in a lot of organizations where you're not fully integrated across departments, but it will really make a difference. So, okay, now we're going to click through the next slides quite quickly. We always talk about metrics, getting the numbers. Next slide. But first and foremost, every number is a person. Next. And every person is connected to other people. No person is an island. Everybody has people, even the most introverted people. And that is where you will deliver on your CPM, your KPI, your MAU, your CTR, your CPA, your all of those acronyms that we love so much. Each one of those is still people and the communities that they live in. Next. So in order to get your ROMI, your numbers, you must start where you want to finish, and that is with people. So if you walk a mile, next slide, with your audience or your market, they will show you what innovation they need. And that is it.
I love that. It sort of puts a different spin on my thinking of innovation, right? And I think you started at the beginning, you said, when we think innovation, it is flying cars. And yeah, that would probably be brilliant and horrific all at once. But that's not where we have to start. Real innovation starts with what people need. And I love each and every example that you use, Bron. It's sort of connected to the ethics side of it, the human side of it. And I think if we can get that wrong, maybe innovation is not flying cars. Maybe innovation is empathy for people. Maybe innovation is, but what do you actually need in your surroundings, in your time frame? If I think about the Ford example, what is it you need in your time frame? We definitely need food security, right? And I think South Africa is a country that there's no need for people to go hungry. We have enough food, but for some reason, like I said, poverty tax, food is a real need. We want to think, when you think Maslow, we want to think esteem, but actually what we need is basics. Your other example, which was quite cool, was the recycling. We've got beautiful oceans. We've got wonderful what's it called? Nature, beautiful nature. But are we actually recycling? Are we actually protecting it? So I think going back to the ethics of it, the humans of it, the heart of it, if we go back to that, it might show you innovation. And our BBA in marketing is geared for entrepreneurs, trying to find the gaps in the market, and maybe for our students, connecting entrepreneurship with our marketing is going, but where are the people? Where are the numbers? The numbers are the people. So I just love that. That was so interesting today. My mind is blown. I'm going to use
fantastic.
for a while. I don't see if we have any questions. If there's any questions from our audience, I'll type it in the text box at the moment. But I suppose I want to ask you, you've worked in multiple agencies, different countries, in different hats. I know you were in the entertainment as well, video, marketing, creative, business consultant, all of those beautiful things. I suppose for a new student, right, that's starting out, maybe for our graduates, do you have any tips for them? Things that you wish you knew as a 20-year something? What would that be?
In a word, curiosity. It's something I've always been, and I didn't realize until like a few years ago. A boss of mine said to me, "You're so curious. Like I always find you talking to the strangest people." So I was at MultiChoice, and like we needed to reclassify basically every piece of content that we ever would broadcast and had on catch up in order for any form of recommendation engine to work, because the genre classifications had been very limited before. And so the guys who were making the recommendation engines were working very, very hard, and the recommendations were just not getting better. And I looked into it. I went and I spoke to the people who classify content. So I was like, what do you guys do? And then I found out, and then went and found the engineers in the basement, in the little dark rooms that they hide in because they don't want anyone to find them, and managed to put together a project that where we reclassified all the content, and suddenly the recommendation engines started working better because it had more data to feed off instead of just action, comedy, romance. It had, I think we wrote a dictionary of about 68 different genres essentially, and then we weighted the way those were seen by the engine, and then it could actually make better decisions. And then at that point my boss said to me, like, "You're so curious." And I was like, actually, I've always been that. Like when I was little, I took the phone apart all the time and switched the cables around to see what would happen. And at one point I made it so that if you took it off the hook, it hung up. And to speak, you had to hold the thing down to speak. Very old-fashioned phones.
For those in the audience who go, what?
Yes. But I've always been like that. I've always taken things apart and wanted to know why they work and how they work. And when he said it to me, it was like this aha moment.
Yeah, I realized moment of being curious, being inquisitive, asking questions. And I suppose it's also about being brave enough to ask questions. Not just asking questions for the sake of asking questions, but being intentional with your questions. And I think for a lot of us, especially us, our graduates, it's about being brave enough to ask questions and finding the answers.
Yes, you're not meant to know everything, and especially marketing. Everything is moving so fast, like every other day we've got something else or some other metric that we're able to use. And, the word of the year has been AI. And, it's like we think that we have to pretend to know the things, or it's really, really bad. My best client right now will literally walk into any room and unabashedly go, "I have no idea what's going on. Please explain it to me like I'm 12.
Yes.
And then
people like that. And I think you mentioned that as well. Yeah. The moment that you make people feel stupid and you use the word, you lose them. So sometimes being the smartest person in the room is actually a disadvantage. Humbling yourself and asking, "I don't know, please tell me," in the most simplest words there is, can actually be to your benefit. Yeah. And I think that connects to one of our polls as well, when they're saying, but what is the most challenging aspect of understanding your audiences? It is understanding behavior and preferences. And the only way to get to that is humbling yourself, being curious, being brave enough to ask questions. And hopefully by doing that, you'll be able to understand the empathy side of it.
Yes.
And then only can you innovate. It's not about starting with flying cars. It's about starting with the people. And how do you start with the people? Asking questions. So this was just so cool.
And you can overestimate or underestimate your audience by just assuming things or being the cleverest person in the room. For a long time, MultiChoice didn't expand their streaming services into the rest of Africa. They just focused kind of on South Africa because there was this bias that there was no internet. Like internet connectivity was low. Meanwhile, the Seacom cable hits the coast at Kenya. Like the most connected country on the African continent is Kenya. And once they opened that thinking, so they stopped underestimating the audience, suddenly the streaming services took off incredibly. And it was about 15 years ago, South African theatre nearly closed down, like nearly ended completely. The Civic Theatre was nearly closed. They closed the Pretoria Theatre. And it was because they were underestimating the audience. They started putting on dumb plays, like stupid plays. And they were like, no, it's more accessible to the audience. And the audience was like, do you think I'm stupid? And they stopped going.
I love that. Yes. Never underestimate. But I suppose it goes back to your principles of immersing yourself and really observing things that you would have assumed. And don't assume. Go back, observe, immerse, and then you went on.
So I see on the poll, I found them now. This is very cool. Tools to track audience engagement. And everyone said social media. So yes, that is a very good place to start. But again, with the walking a mile, if you go and sit in a mall and watch people, like if you're, to the point of the Oyster card in the UK, where they found the problem with going through the booths, right? Immersion as well would be amazing. So audience engagement, like go, if your company's doing an activation and you're not working on it, just go. And don't go with your free VIP tickets. Go walk with your audience. Like that colleague of mine in Australia who walked with the sports people outside the
arena to try and speak sports.
Exactly. Because remember, everyone's fronting on social media. No one posts, like, if I showed you what I look like when I woke up this morning, I don't know who I was fighting with this morning, but I think they won.
We wouldn't post that on social media, yes.
I'm never going to put that on social media. You only put it like a picture on when the hair is hairing and the makeup's makeuping and, the light is lighting. So, like, yes, social media is a great place, and it's great for desk research, right? So you can use, there's a lot of free listening tools and all that sort of thing. CRM software. It's all cool, very cool. But people are fronting online. You got to go reconnect with actual humans. And remember, you would never have found, for example, poverty tax on social media.
Yeah, you would have only seen it. I think that's the takeaway of today. Is innovation is actually immersion into your consumers and understanding what they go through, and that starts with empathy, which is actually such a basic human skill, right? So I always like counter trends, right? It's like technology, but actually it's human. Like we all want to be online, but suddenly there's this trend emerging of people disconnecting, leaving their phones, going to events where they sit and read books together, where they sit and play chess together. And that's sort of like a counter trend. And we're seeing it everywhere, even in marketing, when understanding gaps, innovation, consumers. We want to do desk research, but in actual fact, the counter trend is get up, go out, see your consumers of where they are. I love that.
Absolutely.
Bron, you have absolutely given me so much to think about this afternoon. I am going to have a late lunch and think about all of this and Google. So thank you so much for spending the time with us. Thank you so much for being resilient. To our audience members, thank you so much for still being here. It was obviously very entertaining. That's why everybody is still here. We will definitely share the recording. We'll share your presentation with all the links and the videos that people can watch. So thank you so much, and have a wonderful afternoon.
So fun. Thank you. You too.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.